Welcome to the Week 3 lecture where we will learn more about human resource planning and recruitment. By now you understand just how important human resources are to organizations' performance. Human resource planning is a process that can help organizations maximize the resources available through their employees. Human resource planning involves the forecasting of human resource needs and then the integration of available resources to meet these needs. All of this is done within the context of the organization's overall big picture strategy. Labor costs can be a large portion of many employers' budgets. The human resource planning process can help these employers minimize the cost of recruitment, selection, performance measurement, and training. Ideally, human resource planning helps us satisfy future needs. It can also help us increase employee motivation and have a positive impact on absenteeism and turnover. The planning process can also help us create a competitive advantage. For instance, if we become the best place to work, think about how that might impact not only the business side of things, but also our ability to attract diverse, qualified talent to open positions. A competitive advantage in terms of human resources means that we know how to manage and leverage our people and the knowledge, skills, abilities, and other characteristics that they exhibit. We know how to do that better than anyone else. Forecasting needs in terms of human resources is not an easy task. It requires an understanding of the organization, of the existing human resources, of the organization's strategy, of the interdependencies between different functions of the organization and different functions within the HR department. The process tends to be most effective when we rely on data, on the evidence from the organization, stakeholders, employees, leaders, and when we focus on the big picture, when the planning process is tied to, connected to the organization's strategic plan. Your textbook describes 6 steps of effective human resource planning. You probably won't find these steps in a personnel psychology textbook, but these steps are extremely important to the work that we do. So I've included them here. The first step is to gather information about the current situation. We call this environmental scanning. This involves the collection of data from both inside the organization and outside the organization. Information about opportunities, threats, information that is relevant to the organization's goals, its performance, its mission, vision, and strategy. We might look to social issues, economics, politics. All of these areas in life may provide relevant information that can help us plan for the future. When we scan the external environment, we pay attention to our competitors and how they treat their employees. We can identify the incentives that our competitors use to attract and retain their best talent. These incentives include everything from wages to on-site childcare, to continuing education credits, to the working conditions. Then we evaluate that competitive advantage using criteria such as the quality of production, the average tenure of employees, and training costs. By collecting information from other organizations, we can get ideas about the kinds of policies, practices, procedures that might help our organization better manage its people. The second step of the planning process is labor demand analysis. This is a method of predicting future human resource needs based on future business needs. We do this by getting input from a variety of sources. Of course, we want to get input from the HR department, but we can also ask managers and subject matter experts to participate. We should also consider potential changes in the business or in production. For instance, if one of our competitors is coming out with a brand new product that might have an impact on our release of a new product later in the year. We should conduct multiple regression analyses on available data to try to determine if there is a correlation between some of our HR activities and business outcomes. If we can find relevant correlations, it can help us identify things we should keep doing, as well as the things that we need to change. The third step of the planning process then involves labor supply analysis. This method attempts to identify the availability of human resources, both internal and external sources. Internal labor supply projections are based on our internal stakeholders, our current employees. External labor supply projections are based on information from potential recruits. Say, for instance, recent college graduates. Skill inventories and succession plans can be used to inform the analysis of internal labor supplies. Essentially, we are asking questions like, what is the current state of our human resources? What are the projections for next year? How many people might quit this year? How many people might we hire this year? This image shows some of the ways that we might bring in employees and some of the ways that employees are moved out of a position. Moving employees in through things like external hires, internal transfers, promotions, and the recalling of laid off employees. Employees might be moved out of positions through promotions, terminations, retirement, being laid off. It's important for us to pay attention to the inflows and the outflows so we can understand where and how and why employees are moving around within our organization. To evaluate the labor supply and the external environment, we might collect information about education levels, demographic changes, and technological developments. We might also analyze labor statistics. I pulled this figure from the U.S. Department of Labor's website. I pulled it just as an example to show you evidence, data that we might use to better understand the supply of labor in the environment, the external environment. Once we understand what we have and what we need, we can compare those two sets of data to identify potential talent shortages or surpluses. In 2021, it's predicted that there will be 230,000 job openings, with only 90,000 new college graduates to fill those job openings. Therefore, the deficit, the shortage, 140,000 employees. This kind of information can help employers determine how prepared they are for the future. The fifth step of the planning process involves the actual planning. Action programming is a fancy term for making a plan. Using all of the information that you've collected in the previous 4 steps to try and determine what can be done to make sure that we have the resources we need to meet the demands of the future. There are 2 types of programming. Internal programming involves planning career paths, promotions, compensation design, succession planning. External programming or planning involves interactions with stakeholders outside of the organization. This can include investors, competitors, customers, and the like. The final step of the planning process is to evaluate the process. And while this step is presented as the 6th step, It's actually something that we should be doing continuously, measuring the effectiveness of our planning process. Is it providing value? Are we actually leveraging our human resources better than if we didn't use a planning process at all? Are we able to meet the human resource needs of the future? We can only make that determination once we reach the future and look back on the process. To make this evaluation, we use pre-established criteria and we look at performance feedback. We also look at the outcomes. For instance, at the individual level, we might look at change in job satisfaction, commitment, performance, as well as changes in organizational level variables like financial performance and customer satisfaction. The human resource planning process involves a variety of staffing decisions. These are the choices we make about who and how to recruit, select, manage, train, and terminate our employees. These decisions then determine an organization's workforce because these decisions determine who stays and who goes. Because HR activities are interdependent, the decisions we make about recruiting will impact the decisions we make about selection, about training, about compensation, and so on. Here's a snapshot of the staffing process and some of the decisions that we have to make along the way. The process begins with recruiting applicants, testing them, selecting them, training them, and then measuring their performance. Not only are we interested in the effectiveness of our staffing decisions, we're also interested in their impact on employees' attitudes and behaviors, including their perceptions of fairness. When employees think that staffing decisions are unfair, a number of negative consequences can arise. Their job satisfaction can suffer, they may feel less committed to the organization, and they may find it more difficult to do their job. Employees who perceive unfair staffing decisions are also more likely to file grievances within the company and file lawsuits with the EEOC or private attorneys. We learned last week that these lawsuits can be damaging to organizations in a variety of ways. Lawsuits can hurt the stock value of a company, its reputation, and the loyalty of its customers. The first step of the staffing process is recruitment. We will cover this topic in this lecture. The upcoming videos will cover other aspects of the staffing process. Recruitment is the process of attracting qualified applicants to a job opening. There are a variety of factors that influence how well we are able to do this, how many applicants we're able to attract, and also the quality of those applicants. Everything from the economy to the supply and demand of labor, as we talked about earlier in the lecture, to the organization's reputation, to how much the organization pays employees in that specific role. To recruit job applicants, we can use internal recruiting methods and external recruiting methods. Internal recruiting methods refer to the ways in which we share job openings with current existing employees. We can share this information through word of mouth systems where we share the information with our team, ask the team to share that information with their contacts in the organization, and so on. We can also post the information on the organization's intranet or send the openings through the organization's email. We might also rely on internship and apprenticeship programs to spread the word about open positions. Referral programs tend to yield applicants who are more likely to stay and more likely to perform well. One of the reasons for this is because the applicants are current employees. They already work for the organization, and now they've decided to apply to the same organization but a different role. That's usually a good sign that the employee is willing to stay. Internal recruitment methods are known as high-performance work practices. Some of the best organizations in the world recruit from within. In fact, some organizations will not recruit outside the organization until they have exhausted all internal avenues first. There are a number of advantages to using internal recruitment methods. They are typically less expensive, faster, and more popular with current employees. They can usually provide a more realistic assessment of job candidates because the applicants are current employees, and you can use performance data in the application process. Promote from within policies can enhance motivation, organizational commitment, job satisfaction, and even indirectly job performance. These methods can also be used to reduce turnover rates and minimize training needs. Employees already work for the organization. They won't need the same kind of orientation that a brand new employee might need. However, there are a number of disadvantages that we should also consider. If we promote from within, if we hire from within, we are ultimately taking someone away from another job. For this reason, internal recruitment methods create vacancies elsewhere in the organization. Those vacancies still have to be filled. Related to this is the notion that internal recruitment methods are not as beneficial when our labor supply is low. If we already don't have the human resources that we need, internal methods are probably not going to get us what we're looking for. Internal methods do not help us promote deep level diversity in thought, in skill, in behaviors, in ideas, in creativity. Deep level diversity is tied to organizational performance. Internal methods of recruitment may get us more of the same. Finally, internal recruitment methods are subject to the bias and the personal goals of the decision makers, the individuals who ultimately decide who gets the job. To recruit the most qualified applicants, we can also use external recruiting methods, which share job openings with people outside of the organization. We can use many of the same methods to share this information that we used in the internal recruiting system, such as e-recruiting and referrals, word of mouth. We can also advertise in newspapers, magazines, television, radio, journals, and other types of media. We might rely on employment agencies and search firms to help us recruit. These methods are especially useful for higher level, top level leaders. We might accept walk-ins and have a process set up for individuals who walk straight into the office and ask if we have a job opening. Finally, campus visits can be an effective external recruiting method. Every year, SIUE sets up a career fair on campus where employers are invited to come and speak with our students about job openings and potential opportunities post-graduation. One of the greatest advantages of external methods is that they tend to enhance the deep level diversity of an organization. They do this by bringing in people with new ideas, new skill sets, new experiences. External methods are useful when the internal labor supply is low, when we already don't have enough human resources within the organization to meet our needs, our demands. However, external recruiting methods tend to be more expensive, take more time. They can adversely affect current employees, including group cohesion, employee morale, and the upward movement of current employees. External methods tend to rely on data that is less reliable. We don't know as much about individuals who don't currently work for the organization. Because we don't know as much, we don't have as complete a picture with external applicants as we do with internal applicants. External methods will likely increase training needs by bringing in outsiders, people who are not familiar with the organization. We then must train those individuals to better understand their working environment, including the organization's vision, mission, strategy. Finally, the use of e-recruiting, whether we use it in an internal recruitment system or an external recruitment system, e-recruiting is controversial. Online recruiting systems exclude a number of individuals, namely those who do not have internet access. For this reason, e-recruiting may not be relevant or applicable to all jobs and all industries. This figure highlights some of the advantages and disadvantages of using various types of recruitment media. In the very left-hand column, you see 4 types of communication channels, and then a column of advantages and a column of disadvantages. I won't read the entire figure, but I do want to point out one observation. Notice that internet media is one of the more inexpensive options. The other 3 types, newspapers, magazines, direct mail, television, radio, are all very expensive. To post a job opening in a newspaper, it will cost you several $100s per week. If you post multiple jobs for multiple weeks in multiple newspapers, you can expect to spend tens of thousands of dollars on newspaper ads alone. But just because online recruiting is cheaper doesn't mean that it's necessarily better. There are a number of disadvantages of e-recruiting. I just mentioned a few of them, and here are a couple more. One of the reasons why recruitment is so important to personnel psychologists is because it impacts applicants' attraction to the organization. In other words, the decisions we make about recruitment, the methods we use, the wording we use, the information we share, these decisions impact how applicants view the organization and the job opportunity. It is well documented in the research that applicants infer information about the organization based on their experience throughout the application process. If applicants have a positive experience, they are more likely to have positive attitudes about the organization. If applicants have a negative experience, say the organization never emails them back to let them know they didn't get the job, if applicants have a negative experience, then their attitudes are more likely to be negative about that particular organization. When applicants don't have enough information about the job, about the organization, they will infer qualities about both the employer and the job based on the organization's reputation. I'm sure some of you have went to Glassdoor.com or Googled potential employers to try to find out information about what it's really like to work for them. An applicant's decision to apply to an open position can be impacted by their perceptions of fit with both the organization and with the job. Applicants might pay attention to things like the mission statement of the organization. Does it match with their own values? They might also pay attention to the qualifications of a job. Do they currently have the KSAOs to succeed in that particular role? There's even some evidence that recruiters who are warm, respectful, and knowledgeable about both the organization and the job, that these recruiters play a role in the likelihood that applicants accept job offers. When recruiters have these more positive qualities, applicants are more likely to accept the job offer. Researchers have identified several strategies we can use to have a positive impact on applicant attraction. First, make sure the recruitment system aligns with the organization's strategy. Number 2, make sure you rely on work analysis and job analysis information to identify the job requirements, as well as the strategic measures you will use to evaluate job performance and the HR system and training needs. Number 3, ensure that the initial recruitment practices are as attractive as the later practices. You want to make sure that we hold applicants' attention and interest throughout the application process. Finally, consider assessing the fit between applicants and the organization, applicants and the job. The job characteristics questionnaire is one example of a standardized test we can use to assess this fit. Now let's look at some of the other practices that are associated with effective recruitment systems. Share specific and relevant information that helps candidates decide whether or not the job is a good fit for them, that helps them decide whether or not they have the qualifications required for success in that position. Help the applicants self-select in or self-select out of the application process. Provide a realistic job preview that shares the good, the bad, and the sometimes ugly about a particular job. When applicants have realistic expectations for a job, they are less likely to become frustrated when confronted with the everyday challenges. Hire recruiters with excellent interpersonal skills and train them to interact with applicants in a way that reflects positively on the organization. Make sure they understand the job, that they communicate effectively, that they show respect and concern for job applicants. The demographic characteristics of recruiters really aren't all that important. What matters is how recruiters treat candidates. We also want to continuously evaluate our recruitment practices. One of the things we can look at is time-lapse data to identify the amount of time that passes between two decisions. Say, for instance, the amount of time between posting an ad on Monster and deciding who we are going to hire. We might also look at yield ratios to assess the ratio of applicants to hires at each step of the recruitment and the selection processes. At the very top of this image, you can see that this particular organization had 2,000 recruitment contacts. 500 of them were pre-screened, 100 of them were invited to apply, 50 of them were tested, 25 interviews were conducted, 20 background checks, 10 offers were made, and 10 medical exams were conducted. We start with 2,000 potential applicants and end with 10 individuals who we think have what it takes to succeed in a job. These yield ratios can help us determine whether or not a particular stage or step is providing value. This figure shows some of the other criteria that we might use to evaluate the effectiveness of our recruitment system. The cost per hire, how much it costs to select an individual employee for a specific job. We might also want to look at the job performance of the individuals that we hired. Are they actually performing at a high level? If they are, that says something about our recruitment system as well as our selection and our training system. One of the most important things employers can do to attract Gen Y and Gen Z applicants, or any applicant for that matter, is to offer flexible work arrangements and opportunities for employees to take time off for community engagement or travel or personal growth. The last thing I'd like to mention in this lecture is some of the legal concerns we need to think about in regards to our recruitment plan. In some situations, referral programs or word-of-mouth programs may violate anti-discrimination laws. This is because people tend to surround themselves with people who are like them. If your employees are only referring people who are like them, who are similar to them, your applicant pool is not going to be as diverse as maybe you hope or maybe it should be. All advertising material should be reviewed by an employment law expert for potential legal problems. Finally, e-recruiting, the process of using the internet, online tools, and social media to attract job applicants. E-recruiting may cause disparate impact if it's the only source of job applicants. In most situations, you want to recruit using multiple methods. E-recruiting, online recruiting only, is not recommended and not usually the best strategy. That's it for the week 3 lecture. Thank you for joining me again. Next week, we will learn a little bit more about employee selection.